Hello and welcome to a supremely relaxed episode of the Warehouse Podcast. I'll get into exactly what makes it a relaxed version and why I'm doing it this way in just a moment. I do want to remind you all before we get started that we are part of the Believe Podcast Network. So go over to believe.com, BLEAV, and check out our podcast as well as other Orioles podcasts. Another Orioles podcast on the Believe Network you might recognize is the Verge podcast. Those guys do an awesome job covering specifically the Orioles minor leagues and young players. So go over to believe.com and check things out there. Also want to mention our sponsor for this week's episode. It is Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Mentioning football here on a baseball podcast. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of a $200,000 jackpot. When the game's over, you can head on over to their online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. So head to the website today, that's betonline.ag, to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. So let's get into what is making this episode a little bit more relaxed. You may be able to hear from the audio. I'm not sure. I know my audio is not typically fantastic regardless, but I don't have my normal setup today. Today I'm on my laptop. I am in my car and I am currently sitting outside of a Starbucks, a wonderful nationwide, worldwide coffee chain to get their free Wi-Fi because the week's been a little bit busy for myself. It's fall. My kids are back in school. I'm working. They've got activities. I'm running around. And the only time I've really got to do this is right now, and I need to get out of the house into a quiet spot to do it, sort of guerrilla style podcasting. Um, and I figured, you know what? Why not? It doesn't have to be the absolute best primo audio because you know what? These Orioles right now are not exactly giving us primo baseball to watch. It's been pretty depressing, really going on 3 months now. It's kind of wild that it's been that far back that the Orioles have really been struggling. Now, it's all it's all contextual. These Orioles came into the season off a 101 win season last year. They're clearly not going to get to 101 wins this year. We had high hopes, though. I think a lot of us viewed this team as a World Series contender, certainly an AL East, defending their AL East title. That's probably not going to happen. We had gotten Corbin Burnes, ace of the staff, Cy Young contender. I think we thought between him winning the Cy Young potentially, Gunnar Henderson or Adley Rutschman vying for the MVP. And then we had a couple candidates for Rookie of the Year, Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad, Jackson Holliday, I think coming into the year. A lot of us thought he'd be the guy. A lot of that's really fallen apart here these last couple months. Gunnar continues to be good, but not MVP level good. I think that he's fallen behind, excuse me, Aaron Judge and Bobby Witt Jr. at least. But again, still been good. And Gunnar, the least of our concerns. Corbin Burnes had a horrific August. His chances of winning the Cy Young are, I think, shot at this point. Maybe Colton Cowser still has a shot at the Rookie of the Year. He's been decent overall, although very up and down lately. But Jackson Holliday's been, I would say, a disappointment. Obviously, a young guy. I'm not writing off his career or anything at this point, but has not been fantastic this year and is really struggling as well. And then Heston Kjerstad, of course, has unfortunately had some injury stuff, plus just finding it tough to find playing time on the big league roster. That's all kind of fallen apart these last 3 months. And I think specifically what I'm upset about these last 3 months is what everybody's upset about is, not really the pitching, because honestly, the pitching has sort of figured itself out a little bit. And the pitching has some excuses for their struggles at certain points this year. They've dealt with a lot of injuries. Coming into the year, Felix Bautista was already out for the year. We knew that. And then we knew John Means and Kyle Bradish were hurt coming into the year, but we kind of were, dreaming a little bit. I think at this point, it's fair to say that they'd bounce back. The Orioles would be conservative with them and ensure that they could at least get through the portion of the season that they did pitch in. And that didn't really happen either. We got, a month and a half from the two of them before they were out for the season as well. And, You lose John Means, you lose Kyle Bradish, especially a Cy Young candidate. You're gonna have a tough time. Tyler Wells also out for the year early on. Um, and then there's just been stuff throughout the year. Kramer's had a lengthy IL stint. Rodriguez has had two now. Hopefully he's back by the playoffs. Danny Coulomb, Jacob Webb, two guys that are important to this bullpen. They've been out for a while now. The pitching staff has reasons to explain why they've struggled at certain points. And honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the pitching staff recently. Zach Eflin has been fantastic. Say what you will about Mike Elias' trade deadline. He didn't go get that obvious ace type whatever. Zach Eflin has pitched better, I think, than anybody else that's got traded at the deadline, and probably better than some guys that hadn't. I mean, imagine if we had gotten Garrett Crochet, given up all those prospects, and then he's pitched as well as he has for the White Sox. Would have been a problem. Well, Eflin's been fantastic. Um, Burns had a bad August, but I think ultimately you trust Burns. Albert Suarez has been really a savior for this team. And then in the bullpen, I think Sir Anthony Dominguez is the closer we needed. The pitching is figuring, and Yenier Cano has been good. Ultimately, I think the pitching is to a point that going into the playoffs with them, I feel decent about them. The offense though is horrible, horrible, and it's not one guy. It's everybody. It's really everybody except for like Gunner. There's other guys that have been better lately. I was looking at these numbers just a second ago. I'm just looking at numbers from the last month. But Cedric has been good. Honestly, Cedric's been the Orioles' best hitter the last month. Has a 167 WRC plus. Gunner's got a 129 WRC plus. Anthony Santander a 113 WRC plus. Everybody else that is like an everyday player, because Ramon Urias was good before he got hurt. Emmanuel Rivera has been good in they're platooning him essentially. Levon Soto's only gotten 2 plate appearances, so that doesn't count. Everybody else is below average. Colton Cowser's right about average at 99 WRC plus the last month. Everybody else is below average. Adley's been horrible, 46 WRC plus. Eloy Jimenez, after starting off pretty well, has been horrible, 36 WRC plus. He won't be getting that option picked up, not that we thought he would anyway. Ryan O'Hearn has fallen absolutely apart, 26 WRC plus. Kobe Mayo hasn't figured it out yet, 10 WRC plus. Again, that's only 18 plate appearances, so I'm not going to crush him, especially as a rookie with limited experience. But I am going to crush Adley, O'Hearn, Jimenez. Mountcastle is hurt right now. He wasn't doing well before he got hurt. Probably, this probably has some overlap with him being hurt still. So I'm not really going to crush him on his current number, but he's hurt and the injury outlook on him is not great. Um, it's just bad. It's bad up and down the lineup. I was looking at, again, the last month, just where they rank in the whole league. Their WRC plus is, if I can get this to load, is 90. That's 22nd in baseball between the Twins and the Pirates. Now the Twins are a decent team. Uh, Probably will make the playoffs, so they're not guaranteed. The Pirates aren't good. Then it's the Giants, Red Sox, Rangers, Reds, Rockies, and Angels. So every team below the Orioles is not a very good team. And it's just, it'd be one thing if this was a month in the middle of the season. If this was May to June, you'd say, we got plenty of time. The talent will see itself through. We'll figure this out. But it's mid-September. The playoffs start in 2 weeks. And, that's another aspect of this is, yes, the Orioles are bad. They have been bad for a long time now, but they are still, in all likelihood, going to make the playoffs. Looking at Fangraphs right now, they've got a projected win total of 90.1. They're at 83 right now, so it's winning 7 more games, so about half of their remaining games. Their chances of winning the division are down to 12.9, which seems fair. They're 3 games back in the division. They do have 3 games left with the Yankees, and they just need to win one of those to have the tiebreaker over them. But given where things are headed, they probably need to win all 3 of them to have a really good chance at actually taking the division. But all that said, the Orioles' chances to make the playoffs are still at 99.4%. So there's 6/100ths of a percent chance that they don't make the playoffs. So that's what, 6 out of 1,000 times they've run their simulations here at Fangraphs. The Orioles don't make the playoffs. So, if the Orioles don't win any more games, they're not going to get in with 83 wins, but they're probably going to win, you know, at least 5 more games. Uh, they've got what? They've got 17, 14 more games left. So I think you'd have to feel pretty good about their chances of winning it. But that's kind of where things sit right now is they've been horrible. There's no indication that they're not going to stop being horrible. And yet, because they did so well early in the season, they built in such a cushion for themselves, at least from the rest of the league. They have never had a cushion really in the division, but because they've had such a good cushion from the rest of the league, they're likely going to make the playoffs regardless of how poorly they play, these last couple weeks. And look, this is something that's been bubbling for a while now. People have been upset about how poor the Orioles offense has been online for months. Um, but I think it really starts to, you know, reach an apex when you're getting perfect gamed into the eighth inning and then no hit until the 2 outs in the ninth inning against a quartet of Tigers pitchers that include or that is Bo Brisky, Brant Herder. That Brant is that's a typo. That's something his parent misspelled something on the birth certificate. Brant. It's like Brent? No, Brant. Okay. We're going with Brant. Brennan Hanafy, which is a former Orioles farmhand, and then Tyler Holton. I don't know much about these guys. Hanafy I know a little bit about because he was in the Orioles organization for quite a while. But these other guys, I don't know too much about, and I wouldn't expect any of them to be Cy Young contenders, all-star contenders, unless they are, super relievers or something at that point. And this can happen in baseball. You have a bad day, your opponent has a good day. That's life. That's the game. But it's really just illustrative of how poor the Orioles have been for uh quite a while at this point, and really frustrating when on the other side of the ball, the starter, the Orioles starter, Zach Eflin was very good again. 6 2/3, 1 run on 5 hits, a walk, 3 Ks. The 1 run was a solo homer. Then Soto was even good behind him, and Bowman was fine behind him. They combined for 1.1 scoreless innings. Just really tough to swallow. And then, of course, the only hit was Henderson hitting a triple with 2 outs in the ninth inning. So even given how bad they played, Henderson even put them in a position to tie the game in the ninth inning with 2 outs. Of course, Anthony Santander then struck out to end the game. And then, while I'm in here looking at the box score, you just look at these OPSs for the players. Of course, at the top, it's Henderson with a 904, Santander with an 828, Mullins with a 714, which is weighed down by him struggling early in the year. Obviously, he's been much better later in the year. Rutschman at 717, O'Hearn at 742. Then it dips down to Jimenez 636, Kowser 759, Rivera 609, Holiday 524. Um, it just feels like I think what everybody's saying right now is they're kind of banging their head against the wall saying they need to do something drastic. They need to do something different. They need to try to get out of this rut. They need to switch things up. I don't know how much you can switch things up. There's only so many levers to pull in mid-September. Henderson's leading off. They're trying to get their best hitter as many possible plate appearances as possible because he's the only one doing anything really. Then, of course, Santander and Mullins, I think right now, given recent performance, that makes sense. Those are your top three hitters right now. And so they're batting 1, 2, and 3. Mullins is hitting third. Now, is that a little bit of an indictment of the entire situation that Mullins is hitting third? Yes, it's also a reflection that Mullins has been quite good lately. So I don't really have a problem with 1 through 3 at the moment. Rutschman hitting 4 right now is illogical, though. Adley Rutschman, look, he's a star for this team. He's an all-star. I think he's hurt, and that is screwing up a lot of stuff, but you can't make him not hurt. I get he's well enough to play through things, and he's better still then James McCann. I'm not going to argue that. But how can he hit fourth right now? How can he hit fourth? Look at his numbers. Just this is just the last month. The last month, if I can find his numbers, he's batting 174 with a 258 on base percentage and a 233 slug. Now, the 258 on base is decent for a 174 average, but it's still horrible. It is still horrible. And this evidence right here doesn't even tell me that he's better than James McCann right now. James McCann doesn't play as much, so they try to, put him in situations where he can succeed. But James McCann the last month is hitting 237 with a 244 on base and a 421 slug. I'm not saying you start James McCann over Adley Rutschman, but when James McCann plays, he doesn't hit fourth. So what are we doing? You got to slide Adley down the lineup. He's too easy even out right now, and it's just the reality of it. You need to put Colton Cowser higher. You need to bump Adley down. Now, look, there's not a lot of better solutions, but when Revere's in the lineup, he needs to hit above Adley. When Jimenez is in the lineup, well, I don't even know if I'd put Jimenez in the lineup right now. But like, they need to score runs. They need to score. This is something I looked at yesterday when I wrote for Camden Chat on the bird droppings. Sort of the magic number of runs in a baseball game is 5. If you score 5 runs in a game, you're going to win most of the time. I think that makes sense if you just think about pitching numbers for a moment. Like a guy with a 4.5 ERA, I think you think of as like, he's fine. He's a Dean Kramer. He's a back of the rotation guy that you feel decent about. He's not going to probably win you the game, but he puts you in a position where if your offense has a decent game, they'll win the game for you. 4.5 ERA is fine. A 5 ERA sucks, right? If you're giving up 5, that's bad. So if you're scoring 5, that's good. It's a pretty simple, basic analysis that I don't have a ton of data behind, but in general, 5 runs is kind of the magic number. The Orioles right now are incapable of scoring 5 runs in a game on a regular basis. So I'm recording this on Saturday, so this doesn't include Saturday's game, includes Friday's game, but over the last 8 games, the Orioles have scored 5 or more runs once. They've scored 2 runs or fewer 5 times in those 8 games. And of course, in those 8 games, they're 2-6. They won the one game they scored 5 runs in. I think they won one other game like 3-1, and they've lost the other 6 games. Now, prior to the 6 games they played against the Rockies and the White Sox, the Orioles failed to score 5 runs in 5 consecutive games. I believe those games were against the Dodgers and the Astros, 2 good teams that are going to be in the playoffs. So I think we've seen, in general, the Orioles are incapable of scoring 5 runs unless it's against a bad team like the White Sox or the Rockies. And against good teams, they fall apart. And that is a problem. And as I was saying earlier, you can't bat Adley fourth. I can't really tell Brandon Hyde to do a lot different because the players that he has at his disposal just aren't doing well. Yes, you want Rutschman, Santander, and Mullins hit the top 3 because they are clearly your best hitters right now. But O'Hearn's not hitting, Rutschman's not hitting, Jimenez isn't hitting. Like, yeah, Cowser, you probably could move him up to 4, but then you got back-to-back lefties, Mullins and Cowser. I guess you could put Mullins second, Santander third, Cowser fourth. Okay, but now we're getting into like the nitty-gritty for a team that can't score 3 runs. Like, ultimately, that doesn't matter all that much because then Holiday's not hitting, Mayo's not hitting, nobody is hitting. Then you talk about injuries. There's no good news there right now because Urias isn't coming back tomorrow. Westburg's not coming back tomorrow. Mountcastle's not coming back tomorrow. Mountcastle wasn't even hitting before he went out. But you could make the argument, okay, if we get those guys back by October, you're probably swapping in Urias at third base on a daily basis. Or, what you might be doing, probably what you're doing, is if you have Urias and Westburg, Urias is playing third every day and Westburg's playing second every day. I think right now Jackson Holiday's not a viable starting second baseman in the major leagues. That could change next year. But right now, when you're trying to win baseball games, I don't know how you can start Jackson Holliday. I still think he has things that he offers a team in the postseason. I made an episode, whatever, a week ago about how they don't really have a pinch running option. Maybe Jackson Holliday's that guy. You probably don't love a rookie doing that job because it's a little bit more cerebral and, experience based. Sometimes it's not just about foot speed, but I think I'd like him better than some of the other options they have right now. So maybe there's something there. But that's really the only thing the Orioles can hang their hat on offensively is, well, we feel good about our top three of Henderson, Santander, and Mullins. I think Mullins, you got to be a little bit wary of that though, because he's not really that player, you know, day to day anymore. He's been good recently and he's been good historically, but prior to this year, his last two seasons, he wasn't quite that guy. But in general, okay, you feel good about those three. You get Westberg back. I think they're going to feel good about that. That's four. Urias was really good before he got hurt, but Ramon Urias is essentially a league average hitter. Now on this team, that's a big boost. They don't have many league average hitters right now. They've got three guys that are that, and everybody else stinks. Okay, so then Urias comes back. You got five, and then Kowser makes it six. Now suddenly you have a competitive lineup, but you're relying on two guys coming off injury. You're relying on Kowser to not be in a slump, and you're hoping Mullins is the guy he's been for the last month versus the guy he was for the previous year and a half. It's not great. It's not great at all. But as I said, it's really all the Orioles can do. They're just trying to survive, which is a theme I've had for Mike Elias teams for a long time is they don't tend to overreact with moves. And in mid-September, you can't, there's really no options. You are what you are. You can't go get a player. It's the playoff rosters would exclude them anyway. And the Orioles don't need to win every single game. They need to win a third of their games remaining to get it, and probably not even that. So they're not in a position to be desperate, but it just is what it is right now. That doesn't mean I feel confident about it going into next season, or not next season, into the playoffs. I don't care about next season right now, just the playoffs. I want them to do better than they did this year. And um, right now I have doubts about them being able to do that. Um, and look, I don't want to be hyperbolic about this. A lot of this comes from the fact that we hoped that the Orioles were going to kind of take that next step this year. I think we came into the season not exactly expecting them to replicate 101 wins because that's somewhat irrelevant. 101 versus 96, it's like whatever. You're really good regardless. But they're not probably not even going to get 90 wins. Maybe they'll get 90 wins. They're not going to win the division, at least likely they're not going to win the division. Um, and so it comes from that context of they looked kind of like a juggernaut through through mid to late June. And really since then they've been tough. In July they went 12 and 13, August 13 and 15, September 5 and 6. So all told that's what, 4 games under 500. Look, that's not dreadful. There are teams that do big things that play at a similar level, but I think you just would have liked them to start going on to the upswing here in September. And it just hasn't happened, and we're running out of time for it to happen. So looking ahead at the Orioles' next couple games, they finish up the series in Detroit, then they go home, host the Giants and the Tigers again. Again, these Tigers are doing well right now, and they really need to win games to make the playoffs. So they're a dangerous team to face. And then is the final road trip, final, set of series anyway. 3 in New York, 3 in Minnesota. There's no gimmies on that schedule. There's no White Sox. There's no Rockies. There's no, Blue Jays even who have kind of, struggled this year. There's nobody on there that the Orioles are gonna fall over for the Orioles. And they need to win a handful of those games. They need to win a lot. They need to win 2/3 of those games probably to win the division. That's a tall task to win 2/3 of those games. They're not gonna they've shown no ability to do that. So sort of what I'm bracing myself for is they're gonna go in as a wild card. I hope they're gonna get the wild card series in Baltimore, and that should help them. I feel decent about the pitching staff, which is not something I thought I would have said, you know, a month or two ago. And I'm worried about the offense. And that worry is not really going to be eased by the return of Jordan Westburg and Ramon Urias and even Ryan Mountcastle, just because it's asking a lot for a third of your offense to turn over in a week's time and to hit the ground running there. But look, the Rangers weren't a good team last year in the regular season, and they just caught fire at the right time in the postseason. So I'm not totally done with the Orioles. I'm excited they're going to make the playoffs most likely, but I'm scared, and they're not the sort of dominant team I was hoping they would be. And the reason for that is that the offense is just it's just not there. So I think that's all I got to say. Like I said, it's a relaxed episode this week, live from a Starbucks parking lot in the heart of Baltimore County, where all good baseball podcasts are made. I appreciate you guys for listening through what is likely some rough audio. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are, how you feel about things. Are you worried about the Orioles going into the postseason with this type of offense? Do you have any reason to believe they can bounce back? Let me know in the comments or tweet us on Twitter and threads at the Warehouse Pod. Or if you want to email us, that's fine too, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. If you like what you heard, feel free to subscribe to us on YouTube or on your preferred audio platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere else. And please give us a rating and review, a positive rating, a 5-star rating. Help us reach other Orioles fans, and that would be absolutely fantastic. Again, thanks to the Believe Podcast Network for hosting us and for Bet Online for sponsoring this week's episode. Until next time, my name is Tyler, and this has been the Warehouse Podcast. Thanks for listening.